It's on. Good. Yeah, you guys are going to be recorded. That's not good. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. May I have attention, please? All quiet, please. Thank you. So go ahead, have your notes out. We're going to be continuing with the forms of government. Yes? Forms of government unit. We did get started on that last time, didn't we? Did I give you a definition? Of what? Ainsley, did I give you a definition? Of legitimacy? What was it? Based on? Based on its ability to provide four things, which are? It's in the handout, so I have the handout right next to you. Yes, Maya, go ahead and finish. Good. You've got that. I know, you had that. And I know we did that first part, and then the second part, and we're going to develop that second part quite a bit more today. Okay? Now, oh my gosh, look at that. Mr. Hanson, how dare you? I'm a teacher. I do these things. I've got a quiz for you. How many of you guys are like, I knew you had a quiz because I check your Google Classroom on a regular basis, because the information on the Google Classroom page is going to be very good for students at home as well as you guys, which are basically kind of like at home half the time, right? I know. And so I'm looking for, all the teachers are trying to figure out different things for you to do on the blue day when you're at home and you're feeling blue. Because when you're here, you're green, but when you're at home, you're doing stuff. How many of you guys got a lot of things to do tomorrow in your classes already? What are your big responsibilities so far? What classes? Yeah? Math? English? Yeah, you have something for English, yeah. You're going to have something for English every single time, I can tell you that. For what? Art, good, all right, cool. And for here, I would say you're going to want to start making preparations to get ready to be successful for my quiz. Because the quiz is from the textbook that you're going to take home. Don't bring your textbook to school every day. Take it home. Don't even bother putting it in your lockers because you don't have lockers. You have a home. You have a book. Take it there. That way you don't have to break your shoulders or whatever, your back doing that. Okay? Chapter 1, sections 1 through 3. Do you want to know what the quiz is going to be on? I'll let you know. Ooh, there we go. I'll let you know. You know what? And I think last year was the first year. Poor kids. I actually put page numbers on to help guide students to where the information will be found. You're welcome. So come in to class well prepared. When's a good time to prepare for my quiz? Anytime. All the time. When you can. Before or after the quiz? Yeah, I would say, yeah, almost entirely before, yes. You know what, that's a good question, because I don't know, it's all kind of weird with this COVID thing. I'm actually thinking that I'm not going to be doing so much of the retake on the quizzes, because those are only worth 10% anyway. So really come in prepared well for the first time. I know, you took advantage of that. That was good. You took advantage. It's a little bit harder just with everything going on. Yes? I did. Does that look weird? It does. It does. It does look very weird. Yeah. Good eye, Xander. Good eye. So yeah, those are all the various different things. Some of them overlap with what we're going on here, but for example, I'm not going to be giving notes specifically on Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. Yeah. So read it. Come in prepared. Okay? When is it? Well, I provided that information on the Google Classroom, but I also provided it up here. You guys are green. So Wednesday of next week.
Can you choose the color for blue though? Because I don't like green very much. Well, only like certain green.
Talk to Mrs. Anderson. There's other colors available. Riley, form a petition. Exercise your First Amendment right of your opinion. Form a petition. Get everyone to sign it. I'm not going to take a lot of time in here, but if not enough of you like green, there's still other colors available on the wheel, like pink and purple and orange and yellow and red. Blue's already taken. You'd have to get them to go away from it. That's my favorite color, too. So, did you guys get this? Why would you do that? You're supposed to come into class prepared. Perfect. Yes. You've got it. Okay. Seems like I got a lot of extra copies of this. Okay. Okay. You ready? Legitimacy. Legitimacy. When do the people look at their government and say, yeah, that system we have, I'm okay with it? Curious. Raise your hand if you're okay with the American system of government, elections and democracy and the things that we got going on there. Raise your hand if you're okay with that.
Just the system without any flavor text?
Without, yeah, as opposed to raise your hand if you have a strong opinion. I'm not making you exercise what your opinion is at this point. We'll check later on if you haven't figured it out already. If you have a strong opinion about whether or not the current president, who is one part of our system, should be reelected or perhaps should not be reelected. Raise your hand if you have a strong opinion on that question. There we go, hands down. Raise your hand like, whatever, Trump, Biden, what's the difference? They're both old men. What difference does it make? But notice this, with our system, you can replace one. I mean, that's part of the system. We have elections. That's part of the system. So somebody can go, oh my gosh, I can't stand so-and-so in office. You don't have to have a revolution in order to accomplish a transition in authority. All right?
Yeah.
I mean, when was the last time this country had a revolution to get rid of some system of government? The French never controlled us. We did not declare independence against the French. That is one country in the world that we have not fought in war. Actually, that's kind of interesting. I mean, at times we're like siblings and we're like, France. But we've actually never been at war with France, unless you count the French and Indian War. But we weren't controlled by France then. We were under the control of the British, yes? Oh, that's Jimena, who did we fight a war of independence against? Had an American Revolution? Just pass it on. That's an easy question. Do you remember the Declaration of Independence? We studied it last year. Who did we declare independence from? What? No, you said it. You're what? Say it. Oh my gosh. Speak English. Speak. Say English. Is that what you're going to say? Yes, I thought you said that. It's kind of muffled. That's why I like this device better. I thought you said that, but I was like, I can't hear. So between my bad hearing and your muffled, yeah, you said Britain. I mean, how many of you are like, oh yeah, I knew that. We declared war against the British, and we had a revolution, and we celebrate. When do we celebrate Independence Day? I'm still loving your mask. It is really cool. You have to look at yourself because you've got like this really cool. Is that like a dog or a panda? I don't know. It's really cool. I like it. So when do we celebrate independence? When's Independence Day in America?
I don't know. I probably do know. I just
No, I'm pointing. I'm learning names. It's Morgan. When is Independence Day? July 4th. Yes, it's July 4th. My mom is English. I've told you about my mom. She's English. And you know what? They feel so strongly about it that on their calendar in Britain, they just skip from the 3rd to the 5th. No, they don't. I was joking about that entirely. So it is a kind of a joke. So like the joke is, do they have a July 4th in Britain? Yes, they just don't celebrate it, right? So that's one of those situations where enough people felt like the British governmental system is illegitimate. They ought not to be in charge. And so the colonies declared themselves states, and they had a revolution, and then they set up a government. You're going to learn plenty about that government, the American form of government. But that's the question that applies around the world. When do people say, yeah, this governmental system is okay? I mean, it could use some changes and stuff. I mean, you're not going to like just stop and go, I'm not going to try and make changes. And when is it like, no, we really seriously need to have changes? Let's remind ourselves of what one of the components of this definition was that we covered last time. And it helps us to get through this really weird thing that we're going to have to get through. Because there's people in the world today that are living in countries with governments. And if you were living there, if I were living there, I'd go, this isn't legitimate. I don't like what they're doing. I really don't like what they're doing. If you were living in China today, right? I mean, China has got a cool history and culture and language and food. Sometimes it's a bit too spicy, but that's the way it is in lots of different countries of the world. But I mean, if I were living there, I'd be like, I don't like the government. Raise your hand if you can tell me, why would Mr. Hansen and pretty much everybody else in this class, I think, not like that government? Yeah. What do you mean, rights? Which of those four categories of the legitimacy definition does it fit under? Freedom. Yeah, freedom. You can't see it. It's in the handout. It's freedom! Good grief, I don't have to print it out on a piece of paper. That's in your head. Do you love American freedom? Whatever. Yeah? It's all right. Oh my gosh. I hope that we don't get to a point where I'm much, much older and you guys are more in charge, your generation, and you're like, freedom, whatever. Let's go ahead and have a totalitarian dictatorship. Sure. I don't want it either. Right? We need to, freedom. We need to stand up for it. And yet, here's the weird thing. Make sure you write this down. Because this is something we pointed out last time. Of the four things that people look to the government to do, national security, domestic security, economic social satisfaction, and freedom. Those are the four things, right? The one that seems to not stick or is the most difficult to get to stick is freedom. And it's kind of frustrating. It's kind of frustrating. It's like a real head scratcher. And it doesn't have to do with genetics. You can't just say, like, historically, Russians and Chinese and many other people in the world have had governments that don't provide much freedom. It must be something in their genes. It must be something DNA. No. But then what is the explanation? Why is it that? Why is it that way? How come it is such that in America, most people care so strongly about freedom, they would be really upset if a governmental system started taking it away. I mean, they get really upset when, for example, there was a lot of controversy. Donald Trump, during some of the, have you followed in the news? Were there protests this summer? Have they been going on still? Now, some of them are kind of quiet and peaceful and do some of them get a little bit crazy? And sometimes they just might say something you don't like. Well, there were some protesters out in front of the White House, and President Trump ordered some of his law enforcement peeps to clear the area so that he could, hold a press conference, and so forth. And some people were really upset about that because they were like, Trump, you're clearing people who, in that particular situation, the argument was they were being very peaceful, right? You don't just clear peaceful protesters away because they're peaceful protesters. Now, what if they're having a riot and they're tearing down buildings and destroying stuff? I mean, that is a way. I'm going to destroy your place of business because the way of me getting my word out there is to destroy your place of business. Is that a legitimate way to, like, what about the person who's at the business? I mean, he's like, rah. So anyway, so I mean, it's controversial. People will look at Trump doing that and so forth. But if, some other, Vladimir Putin, we'll be talking about Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is the president of what country? Russia, yeah. If Vladimir Putin is one of his major political opponents, is poisoned, and it's like, that wasn't the first time. And he's like taken to Germany, and the scientists are looking and going, yeah, this guy was poisoned. And it was the same poison that was used on another political opponent, critic of Vladimir Putin. I mean, what? Is that guy getting away with that in his country? Are people rising up in Russia to overthrow Vladimir Putin because... But question, Maya, is he, under the definition that I've created, that I'm focusing on, is he legitimate for the most part in the minds of most Russians? Well, I'll ask it another way, because that's a good question, because if I were living there, I'd be like, this is not good. He wouldn't be legitimate in my mind. But that's not the definition. It's not legitimate in your mind. It's legitimate in the minds of many people. One sign that the people no longer think their government's legitimate is they're rising up to overthrow them. Or is there a revolution taking place in Russia right now? There isn't. So how can he get away with that? How can Putin potentially get away with killing his political opponents where Donald Trump is getting criticism for clearing an area in front of the White House? Because it's a different country. It's a different situation. We want to look at that. You ready? Here's a key part of my argument. I want you to write this down because I'm going to develop it over time. It's hard to run a government and hit all four of those parts. National security, keeping our country safe from outside invasion. Domestic security. What was domestic security? We covered that a little bit last time, didn't we? What's domestic security? Keeping our country safe from, the things that are going on inside. Crime would be one, riots, when peaceful protesters aren't quite so peaceful anymore and they're actually rioting in the streets. That's domestic insecurity, okay? Economic, social satisfaction, that's kind of a nebulous one, but if it's your economic, social satisfaction, what are you going to say? I'm satisfied because I have... As far as the economic part, we'll get to the freedom part in a moment. What's going to make you economically satisfied? How many of you guys are economically satisfied right now? Did you have lunch? Did you have clothes? Did you get transportation? Are you being kicked out of your house? Are you living off the street? Do you have no prospect for having any financial? You're like, ooh, this is getting a little too close. Okay, anyway, we'll need to report this. But I mean, if you got a job and things are going okay, then you might go, I'm feeling pretty good. The economy's good, I got a job, I'm okay with the government. And it's weird because sometimes it's like, well, what's the government got to do with whether or not you got a job? Well, there's some of those things. I mean, like in our country in the 1930s, were there a lot of people out of jobs? Anybody know? Yeah, that was the Great Depression. We had unemployment at 25%-ish year after year after year. There were a lot of people who were out of work. I mean, what's the government going to do when a bunch of people are out of work? If the government wants to make sure that those people aren't starving, they got at least some money for food. Create job programs or give Social Security or give unemployment benefits and things like that. What did this country do when all of a sudden when COVID hit and quarantines were all over the place and businesses were shutting down? Any of you guys know? Raise your hand. Tell me, what did our government do? Congress, Republicans, Democrats, yes. They sent people money. Yeah, we borrowed it from somewhere. Hopefully we'll be able to pay it back. They sent people money so that they're like, I got money. I'm not going to starve this week. And so that's, that helps. Because otherwise, if enough people are really starving and having economic dissatisfaction, what might they do to their government? Overthrow it, exactly. So those are three. My thesis is those first three sometimes can be really, really hard. And when you go year after year having it difficult to meet the first three, you might not get around to the fourth one, which is freedom. I'll say it another way. Countries like the United States that have a strong love for freedom. We've had good national security over a long period of time. We've had good domestic security over a long period of time. Our economy, social satisfaction has been pretty good over a long period of time for a lot of people. When those things are taken care of, those first three things, when those are doing well, then the people are like, okay, I feel safe, I feel secure, I got a job, I want my freedom too. Government, don't tell me there's no reason you can't protect my freedom and provide for my freedom. Whereas, imagine this, domestic security, right now. If you're in a city that's been having riots day after day after day after day, and the government is having a hard time keeping people from bashing each other's heads in, and so the government's like, I'm sorry, in order to maintain some security, everyone's going to have to stay at home. Now, what does that take away from? Your freedom, exactly. But what, arguably, will that provide? A little bit domestic security. It's an interesting payoff. My argument, as we'll go through, and we'll see this with the Russian example on the next unit, some countries have such a problem with national security and or domestic security, sometimes economic problems, that freedom has never been able to really take deep root. And if it doesn't take deep root, you're not going to find as many people standing up for it. So I feel for those people, and I've seen them. People in Russia and China that love freedom, maybe even love it more than the average American. Because what are they willing to do in their countries with repressive governments? They're willing to protest. And do they know what could happen when they protest? They could die. Yeah, I mean, I remember one of the first trips, actually it was the first trip I took students to. It was to China, communist China, 2000. And we're going around Beijing, and we're in Tiananmen Square, big, huge open area. And there was this big, huge portrait of Mao Zedong, well, actually, he's right over here. Mao Zedong, the guy in the middle, founder of the Chinese Communist Party, first communist dictator, 1949 until he died in 1976. His portrait is looking out over Tiananmen Square. The Communist Party is in charge, still is. And there were some people who were like, well, we want our religious freedom. And the Chinese Communist government's like, we don't care about your stupid religious freedom. And so those people were actually protesting. And the government was cracking down on them. And when I was there, we were told, our group, don't take any pictures of any protesters. I'm like, what's going to happen if we, a bunch of like American tourists, take pictures of like Chinese people protesting? Because then we'll take your group, and we'll take the pictures, and da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, whoa. That would be really risky, because we look around Tiananmen Square and there's uniformed police. And you guys be good at spotting a plainclothes police? You think you could? What would be a giveaway? They could have a walkie-talkie. What else? They're looking around. Yeah, they're looking around. They're kind of like serious. I could spot those after a while. Because if you've ever been at a place and like somebody's looking at you, like if you're a young person, you go to a store or something, and they're like, oh, you're a shoplifter. I mean, you just feel it. Yeah, and so we noticed that because we were going around, and we were about to go under the great portrait into the imperial city, the imperial palace and so forth. And we're going under the portrait of Mao Zedong, and it was weird. And there was this little person, little Chinese person, and they came up. And one of my students was like, Mr. Hanson, look. And I turned around, and there was a Chinese person standing about as far away from me as you are. And they were holding up a sign. I don't read Chinese. But I have a pretty good idea of what it said. Not that I know how to read Chinese. Because other protesters had held up these signs around American tourists and other foreign tourists. Because they wanted to be seen. They wanted the outsiders who could go back out into the outside world to report on what was taking place in China with the government crackdown on religious freedom. They held a little sign up there that said, Falun Gong is good. Falun Gong was a religion in China that was being repressed at that time and continued to be repressed. And so what did I do? When I saw, my student was like, oh, and I looked, and I saw the person holding the sign up, and almost instantaneously, as they held the sign up, the uniformed police, the plainclothes police, the van pulled up. They grabbed them. They took them away, probably to one of those re-education centers where they were going to be like Re-educated first. Yeah, they do a lot of re-education, but it's not much fun. Did I take a picture? No, I didn't want to impede what was going on with my students. Did I take a mental picture? Have I shared that mental picture? I just did. Yeah, I just told you the story. I mean, that person was trying to stand up for their religious freedom in that particular context and took a great risk and got snuffed. I mean, later, like apparently a couple of years later, there were literally people protesting for their religion, lighting themselves on fire in order to attract attention to the hostility and repression and lack of freedom from the Chinese Communist government. What's that? You'll do that if it gets canceled? I have the freedom to trick or treat, and nothing will stop me. I'm going to get my sweeties. I mean, organize something like some kind of an alternative thing. I'm going to school the next day. Actually, I think, and it's on a weekend anyway. Yeah, I mean, that's messed up. Figure out something. I'm sure people will be very creative in order to get the candy companies are going to make sure that you get your candy. I mean, just do like we do. I mean, my wife and I, me especially, get plenty of candy. I mean, here's the deal. Halloween is on October 31st, right? When do you start buying the candy? When do you don't start buying the candy on October 31st? How many of you guys, your family gets candy, purchases candy for Halloween like at least 2 weeks ahead of time? How many of you guys have to go back to the store to replace it? All right, well, there, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, so that's, yeah. So sometimes when my wife will buy the stuff we don't like, I'm like, why do you do that? So we won't eat it ahead of time. So anyway. All right, so these are very, very important things that are going on. I want to show you something with respect to legitimacy, because I'm going to hone in on various different component parts. Let's look first at, actually, let's see if you can figure this out. Okay, did I show you this before? Yeah. I did, okay. So, did I show you the video? No. So what I want you to look at in the video is particular attention to the adults, the father and the mother. They seem to have the governmental authority within that household. Are they following through? Are they making decisions that give them legitimacy, that are helping provide for national security, domestic security, economic, social satisfaction? I don't know about the freedom part. Okay, so here's the clip. Where does the mom and or dad fail? Because they will. They will fail. Okay.
Sometimes at the height of our revelries, when our joy is at its zenith, when all is most right with the world, the most unthinkable disasters descend upon us.
Oh, that's going to solve it right there. Yeah, well done, mister. Who failed? How many of you guys say the woman failed? How many of you guys say the man failed? How did he fail? Just yelled at the dog. What kind of way did he fall legitimacy? What kind of way did he fail? Which of the choices? Yes?
National. He failed his national security.
Good. How so?
But a foreign threat came in and left with more than when they came in.
Yeah. He failed to protect his country's borders. What should he have done to protect his country's borders, his household? Yes? What? Wow, put rat poison out for the dogs? I mean, what would be perhaps a little bit milder thing? Yeah, how about closing the back door? Maybe making sure that the back door wasn't a ratty, like beat up, screen door thingy. I mean, the guy failed miserably on national security. By the way, did the mom provide for economic social satisfaction? I mean, hello, that was a turkey dinner. That looked good. right? And then he tried to make it up for her later. How did they make it up? Yeah, they went and eat Chinese that night. Yeah, they had Peking duck. It was good. That's right. So let's look at that first one, okay, which is national security. Let's focus that one because that's going to be a big one. Write this down, national security. We're going to get some analysis on national security. He failed. He couldn't keep the Bumpus' dogs out. And they were a clearly identified threat to the safety and security and food well-being of that household. What a miserable failure. I mean, good grief, that's like a number one job of governments. Because if you can't protect your country from foreign invasion, I mean, game over, people. I mean, you can look at this way. Did Native American tribes throughout the continent of North America succeed in the national security threat that they faced from the time of the arrival of Europeans after Christopher Columbus? Did they? Were any of them able to succeed at keeping out the European arrivals? Yeah, I mean, at times, at various places. I mean, you got like exceptions like the Battle of Little Bighorn. Custer and his army got whooped. But after that, forget it. All right, so let's look at this. All right, national security. This is a huge priority. Huge for a government. If you can't do that, you're going to get invaded successfully. All right? So what do you need? What do you need in order to be successful in your national security area? Like armies? Let's start with that. A military. Boom. Let's have that. I mean, that's kind of an obvious one. You need to have a military for the most part. Okay? You need to have a military. Maya, tell me about this military that we need to have. Okay, so we're going to have a military that will protect us from people, you know, we don't want, I mean, if people come to visit as travelers or as students or, you know, whatever, but we don't want foreign armies to come in and, like, exercise their control over us. All right, so, again, tell me a little bit more about this military we're going to have. I mean, does it need to have a lot of people in it or what? Well, strong. I like that word. You guys want to write down strong? Strong. All right. Let's elaborate on this one. Ainsley, how is my military going to be strong? Okay, so we need good leadership. Okay, so write that down. Good leadership. Okay, so we don't just pick up somebody off the street. We want somebody who's well training. Let's throw that in there as well. Well